Welcome, dear friends, to a captivating journey back in time, as we explore life in Roman Britain, a land where ancient British traditions met the power and sophistication of the Roman Empire. For nearly 4 centuries, Britain was part of Rome's vast domain, and the influence of Roman culture left a lasting mark on its people, towns, and countryside. But what was daily life really like under Roman rule? In this program, we'll look beyond emperors and conquests to discover the everyday experiences of those who lived in Roman Britain: soldiers on the frontier, merchants in bustling towns, farmers working Roman-style villas, and local Britons adapting to a new way of life. What did people eat? How did they live, work, worship, and spend their leisure time? What happened when Roman customs clashed, or blended, with native Celtic traditions? Through expert insights, archaeological discoveries, and vivid reconstructions, we'll uncover how Roman rule transformed life across the island, from grand cities to rural outposts. Join us as we step into a world of mosaics and marketplaces, gods and governors, into the rich and complex story of Roman Britain. This is Time Strem, and our journey into the past begins now.
They eventually invaded a sort of like a line which went sort of like to York from, I can't remember, I think it's from Exeter to York. It's sort of like they went as far as that, and that was really because in those areas much more agricultural produce could be gathered, and that's their initial idea. But of course, eventually they kept proceeding further and further, and we've heard about Hadrian, of course, Emperor Hadrian. I think it was 300 AD, something of that nature, built Hadrian's Wall, and it's really because beyond that the tribes, where we have Scotland today, were rebelling, and they would be kept out, and that would be heavily patrolled by soldiers with various bases along the in the towers. Where they sort of lived, really barracks really, and a lot of the towns we have today are actually sort of based on Romans. The Romans brought about, of course, Romans brought London about. It's because of the Romans that we have London. And sort of initially the city of London was trading for trade. A lot of using the River Thames, built where it is because at that time that's as far as the boats could go upriver, and of course they would bring in goods that's as far as they could go. You see, the boats, that's why they was built where it was, and then travel out on the as the tide was going out, you see. And called Londinium, obviously, at the time, as became London as it is today. And but we still have some of the roads as well. Some of the road systems, they would build roads very straight, and there are part of the A303 actually going west to Devon today. It's actually very straight, and that's because it was at one time built on an old Roman road. And also they provided water systems which far more advanced than anything that had been in place before. Like at Bath, for example, there's an area of hot water springs. They turned into, effectively Roman baths, really, and sort of remind which.
Cities were at the heart of ancient Roman civilization, serving as centers of administration, commerce, culture, and daily life. From the capital city of Rome itself to provincial cities spread across the vast Roman Empire, urban life reflected Roman values, organization, and architectural innovation. The city of Rome was the political and cultural capital, home to over 1 million people at its peak. It featured iconic landmarks such as the Forum Romanum, Colosseum, and Pantheon. As the empire expanded, Rome established cities in newly conquered territories, including Pompeii, Ostia, Carthage, Londinium, London, and Eboracum, York. These cities followed the Roman model, with planned streets, public spaces, and monuments. Typical Roman cities included key structures such as forums, public squares for trade and politics, basilicas, public halls, amphitheaters, temples, baths, and aqueducts. Roads were laid out in a grid pattern, with two main streets, the Cardo, north-south, and the Decumanus, east-west, forming the city's core. Water supply and sanitation systems, including sewers and aqueducts, demonstrated Roman engineering skill. Roman cities were also administrative centers. They housed provincial governors, courts, and military garrisons. Local elites, often Romanized natives, played roles in governance, helping to integrate the empire's diverse population. Daily urban life was vibrant. Markets, theaters, and baths served as hubs of social activity. Citizens enjoyed access to public amenities, though living conditions varied widely between the wealthy, who lived in large homes, and the poor, who often lived in crowded insulae, apartment blocks.
Houses would not be like this one, which is a farmhouse. They would perhaps be a bit more like the houses in Rome. So they would have pillars, they would make themselves up quite a comfortable place. They would have underfloor heating. There's only one room in this farmhouse that has the underfloor heating, but they would have all that. So they made themselves quite comfortable. There's been lots of evidence found where the Roman cavalry was, where big stable areas were. So they did a lot of building. They did a lot of road building. This is where we come to what did the Romans ever do for us? And certainly the roads, instead of those dirt tracks that us Brits were happily poodling along with our ponies and carts, they would build these lovely straight roads using their measuring instruments. They'd march up and down them. So they tried to take over, basically.
Forts were a vital component of ancient Rome's military infrastructure, playing a key role in securing borders, protecting trade routes, and maintaining imperial control over conquered territories. Known in Latin as castra, Roman forts were strategically placed throughout the empire, from the deserts of North Africa to the hills of Britain. Roman forts varied in size and function. The largest, known as legionary fortresses, housed entire legions of up to 6,000 soldiers. Smaller forts, called auxiliary forts, held several hundred troops and supported local defense and patrol operations. Temporary camps were also built during military campaigns and later developed into permanent fortifications if needed. Forts were typically rectangular in shape and surrounded by defensive walls, towers, and deep ditches, fossae. The layout was highly standardized, with two main roads, the Via Praetoria and Via Decumana, intersecting at the headquarters building, Principia. Inside the fort were barracks, granaries, workshops, stables, and baths, all designed to support a self-sufficient military community. Roman forts served not only military functions but also administrative and economic purposes. They acted as hubs for tax collection, local governance, and trade with nearby civilian settlements, vici, that often grew around the forts. These communities became centers of Roman influence and culture in the provinces. In Britain, famous Roman forts include Vindolanda and Housesteads along Hadrian's Wall and Caerleon in Wales. Archaeological finds from these sites, such as writing tablets, armor, and household items, offer valuable insights into daily life in and around Roman forts. Roman forts were more than defensive structures, they were symbols of Roman order, discipline, and authority. Their design, durability, and strategic placement helped Rome control a vast and diverse empire for centuries.
The internal arrangements follow one general plan. While in later forts the buildings are all of stone, in Claudian and Flavian forts wood is used throughout. And in many forts as late as 160, only the principal buildings seem to have been constructed of stone. In the center of the fort was the headquarters, a rectangular structure with a front entrance which gave access first to a small cloistered court, then to a covered hall bordered by a row of 3, 5, or even 7 rooms containing the shrine of official worship and the pay and record offices. These filled the middle third of the fort. In the other 2/3 were barracks for the soldiers. No space was allocated to private religion or domestic life. The shrines which individual private worshippers might visit, the bathhouse, and the dwellings of shops of the camp followers lay outside the walls. Such were nearly all Roman forts in Britain, differing little from those in other provinces.
Roman roads in Britain were among the most impressive engineering achievements of the Roman occupation, facilitating military movement, trade, and communication across the province. Constructed shortly after the Roman invasion in 43 AD, these roads connected major settlements, military forts, and ports, forming the backbone of Roman infrastructure in Britannia. The Roman road network in Britain extended over 3,000 kilometers and followed a highly organized and standardized design. Roads were typically built in straight lines, even across challenging terrain. Engineers constructed them in multiple layers: a foundation of large stones, a middle layer of gravel or sand, and a paved surface, often with a slight camber to allow for drainage. Ditches were dug along the sides to prevent flooding, and milestones were placed to mark distances. Key Roman roads in Britain included Watling Street, which ran from Dover through London to Wroxeter, Ermine Street, connecting London to York, and Fosse Way, running diagonally from Exeter to Lincoln. These roads allowed Roman legions to move quickly across the province and were essential for maintaining control over the territory. In addition to military use, Roman roads supported trade and the movement of goods such as pottery, grain, wool, and metal. Merchants, officials, and civilians used these roads daily, contributing to the integration of Roman culture throughout the island. Even after the Roman withdrawal in the early 5th century, many of these roads remained in use for centuries. Some later evolved into modern roads and highways, and their routes are still visible in the British landscape today. Roman roads in Britain were a testament to Roman engineering skill and administrative planning. They played a crucial role in the Romanization of Britain and left a lasting legacy on the country's infrastructure and development.
Steps by which these results were reached can to some extent be dated. In 49 CE, a colonia or municipality of time-expired soldiers had been planted in the old native capital of Colchester, and though it served at first mainly as a fortress and thus provoked British hatred, it soon came to exercise a Romanizing influence. At the same time, the British town of St. Albans was thus sufficiently Romanized to receive the status of municipium, which at this period differed little from that of a colonia. London became important. Romanized Britons were numerous. In the Great Revolt of Boudicca, 60 to 61 CE, the rebels massacred many thousands of them, along with actual Romans. The movement increased over the next 15 to 20 years. Tribal capitals sprang up, such as Silchester. The hot springs of Bath were exploited. Another colonia was planted under Domitian, emperor from 81 to 96 CE, at Lincoln, and the third at Gloucestershire in 96. The fourth, established on the west bank of Ouse at York, belongs to the early 3rd century and marked the upgrading of an existing town. A series of judicial legates were appointed to attend the increasing civil business.
When the Romans invaded Britain in 43 AD, they brought not only their armies and infrastructure, but also their language, Latin. Over nearly 4 centuries of Roman rule, Latin became the dominant language of administration, military command, trade, and education in the province of Britannia. Latin in Roman Britain existed in 2 primary forms: Classical Latin, used in official documents, inscriptions, and by the educated elite, and Vulgar Latin, the everyday spoken form used by soldiers, merchants, and common people. Vulgar Latin was more flexible and regionalized, and it likely absorbed elements from local Celtic languages spoken by the native Britons. Latin was the language of government and law. Inscriptions on public buildings, tombs, altars, and milestones were written in Latin, and it was the official language of the military and Roman administration. Many British towns had Latin names, such as Londinium, London, Eboracum, York, and Verulamium, St. Albans. Latin was also used in education, especially among the Romanized elite and in towns where Roman culture had the strongest influence. The spread of Latin varied across regions. It was most prominent in urban centers, along major roads, and near military forts, where Roman presence was strongest. In rural areas, native Celtic languages continued to be spoken widely, though they too were influenced by Latin vocabulary over time.
This is a collection of coins. Most of them are from the late 3rd century, a time, well, it was not really the best time to be in the Roman Empire, the late 3rd century. They were killing emperors very quickly at that stage. but it's a place where we talk about Roman money and the money that Roman soldiers were paid. So we know, for example, that the soldiers of the 20th Legion, when they arrived here, they just had a pay rise. They were being paid perhaps 300 silver denarii a year, a basic Roman soldier's wage. And that's actually quite a lot of money. I've seen various estimates of how you try and translate 300 denarii into modern terms, but the best way of looking at it is that 100 denarii is about the minimum you need to survive at that time. So 300 denarii is a good wage. A centurion could be earning 10 to 15 times that. The tribunes were largely of the equestrian class, and there was a property qualification. You had to own property worth 100,000 sesterces, which is about 25,000 denarii. No, it's 1 to 4. So yeah, about 25,000 denarii. The man in charge, the legatus, he's a senator. He has to have property worth 1,000,000 sesterces, 250,000 denarii. So the man at the top, he's got 250,000 denarii, and the common soldiers have about 300 denarii a year. That's the kinds of money that's going around, if you like. Of course, 300 denarii isn't exactly what you get, because you lose a certain amount of that for various deductions like food, bedding, training equipment costs, clothing. You're contributing towards your pension. But even so, you still have quite a lot of money left over for spending in the Canabae Legionis, that part of the civilian settlement that is built outside the fortress. Here in Diwa, it's outside the east gate, and that's where the soldiers go and seek various forms of recreation, shall we say.
In Roman Britain, the Forum was the central public space in many towns, serving as the heart of political, commercial, and social life. Introduced by the Romans after the conquest in 43 AD, forums were constructed in major settlements such as Londinium, London, Verulamium, St Albans, and Eboracum, York, following the architectural and civic traditions of Roman urban planning. A typical Roman forum was a large open square, usually rectangular and surrounded by colonnaded porticos and important public buildings. It functioned as a marketplace, a meeting place for citizens, and the location of key administrative and religious structures. Goods such as wine, olive oil, pottery, textiles, and grain were traded there by local and foreign merchants. One of the forum's main components was the basilica, a large public hall used for legal proceedings, civic meetings, and official announcements. Magistrates held court there, and citizens gathered for political discourse and administrative business. The forum often included a temple, where Roman gods were worshipped, symbolizing the unity of civic and religious life. Forums in Roman Britain were constructed using local stone but followed Roman design principles, including paved floors, arches, and sometimes mosaic decorations. Their placement at the center of the city reflected their importance. Roads typically led directly to the forum, making it easily accessible to citizens, soldiers, and travelers. Beyond practical use, the forum was a powerful symbol of Roman authority, culture, and order. It represented the presence of Roman civilization in the provinces and helped integrate native Britons into Roman political and social life.
As we conclude our journey through the daily life of Roman Britain, we've uncovered a world where Roman innovation met local tradition, creating a unique and complex society. From villas and bathhouses to markets and military forts, life under Roman rule was both familiar and foreign, structured and evolving. Though centuries have passed, the echoes of Roman life still resonate in Britain's landscapes, languages, and cities. Thank you for joining us as we brought this remarkable chapter of history back to life. Until next time, keep exploring the past that shapes our present. This is Time Stream. See you next time.